Welcome back to the Social Newsroom. Now, just tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, what you've done, where you are today, where you're going, not just as a person, but as a company, your, aspirations, ambitions.
Sheesh, that's a lot.
Yeah.
So my name is Bramuel Mwalo. I'm the founder and CEO of Zetova. Let's start with my mission. I am passionate about using technology to just simply have Africa identify itself, discover itself. And what this means is my knowledge, my experience, my connections, my network, and how do I use these things to basically build technology. So I've been involved in two significant startups. This is my second one. And in this specific one, our work is simply to just build technology that makes sense. Either we are affecting how food is distributed or grown. We are affecting how financing is accessed. We are affecting how, value for money is realized by the enterprises that basically make up for almost 60% of, the availability of opportunity in an economy. So our work really at the end of the day, all my passion as Bramuel is simply with all the knowledge I have or all the exposure I have with technology, how do I build teams? How do I build an organization that can take that and actually integrate it into people's lives and transform them in one way or another? So that's my passion. Where I'm going with this, all my time is in Zetova. I think I wake up, I work, I go to sleep, I wake up, I work, I go to sleep 7 days a week. And that's simply what I do every day. I probably will rest when, in healthcare until when we see availability of medicine, where it's needed, when it's needed, without wastage of resources. When it comes to food, how are farmers adapting to climate change? And all these things underpin in terms of how artificial intelligence is used to make these things happen, how just simply access to data and data utilization is used to make these things happen. So that's my life. That's what I've committed my life to.
I mean, technology is currently the big word. Is this something you just bumped into, going with a trend, or is this something you're passionate about? Did you always want to do this?
No. So I'm a researcher by background. When I grew up, I didn't know what I wanted to be. Actually, there's an interview where I was asked, so what was your vision? For me, I wanted to be a fireman. And
What?
a fireman, like Zimamoto. That's what I wanted to become. And then, when you're younger and you have your brothers, your siblings, your cousins, there's an architecture, a doctor. And I come from this family of really accomplished doctors and all, where minimum viable is a PhD. And then here you are saying you want to be a fire person.
Depression now.
Yeah, so I started being relevant. So at some point, I wanted to be a doctor. At some point, I wanted to be. So it's not something I always wanted to do. But then when I finished campus, undergraduate, I really struggled with what I wanted. But then I decided to just follow my curiosity. Did a few things, then ended up with I remember I did an interview with the Vice Chancellor of KCA University. And the prof asked me, so I was presenting something, and then I chose to just present what I'm passionate about. And then I'll say, Prof, allow me to just present what I'm passionate about. I wouldn't waste your time trying to give you ideas that I don't care about. I have an idea and I think I'm passionate about. So he gave me a chance to set up the first incubation and acceleration center. That time when they were popping up and they were a big thing. And that was the first time I did something that I really loved and I enjoyed working with. And launched.
That was your first job?
That was my first. No, that was my first proper job. I did other things here and there. And then from there, I became a researcher. So that started my journey. And then started doing some work with Stockholm School of Economics. We did a bit of research in terms of entrepreneurs in Africa and how do we develop entrepreneurs. As I was working with entrepreneurs, I actually learned a lot of things in terms of how do you actually make $0 to $10 million turnover. And those kind of things, and then just seeing the way either there's wastage, either there's a missed opportunity because of this gap and that gap and that gap. And one thing leading to another, started a company that I was very popular for, that actually put me on the limelight. It was called Countable, San Francisco based. And then when I was doing that company, then some gaps came out very clearly from that company. And then now I left that to start Zetova. And that's now why I have this level of clarity on what I need to do as Bramuel in terms of just investing myself and what I'm able to do to basically build what technology can become. So I didn't know. I'm not a techie. Like, this is something I've grown with as time has gone.
I mean, I'm curious to know, Zetova, what does it mean?
The next marketplace.
The next marketplace.
Yes.
So you would say this was your first startup? This
is my first proper startup where I made the decision to start something. The other ones was I was approached to be part of, I came up with ideas. I came up with, I was involved in starting it, but it was not my individual decision. For Zetova is the one thing that I've lost so many things for. The one that you have to abandon a comfortable life to actually start with zero knowledge of how I'm going to make it work. And I remember my first project, we spent quite some, my savings from the previous company. I had this really idea of building this robust blockchain, AI-powered intelligence network. Nobody understood it. We sank serious money.
How long ago was that?
That's in 2019.
Wow.
And that was my first product for Zetova. Nobody understood it. And then now I had to break that project down into really small things. And I remember pitching HTML, screens for people to understand it. And that's how we got traction. But it was.
It looks like you are way ahead of yourself and your time. I mean, idea generation, to even think of having a startup. This is your first one and it's successful, I must say. What do you think? Because you earlier said you've interacted with a lot of guys who are starting up businesses here and there. What do you find to be the biggest challenge, especially in Kenya, with startups?
We try to fit in a box a lot.
Okay.
And not everything that works is supposed to be globally or universally accepted. There are certain things that actually work, but it takes you to be in that environment to understand how it works. And Africa is going to suffer from populism. And this populism in terms of, for instance, you find that when there's big money directed, like for instance, there's a lot of big money in fintech, but now fintech is going through a plateau stage where a lot of organizations that basically are fintechs and all that stuff. There's a lot of, tech in there. It's a safe zone. There's a lot of research, a lot of tests and all that stuff. But then talk about food security. We are not wired to, or startups are not designed, because I'll give you an example of about 3 types of startups. One is you figured out a product, like let's say I've built a payment gateway. A payment gateway that simply is able to verify information from person A to B and to make sure what the left hand has given, the right hand on the other side has received. So it's basic product. And then I just need to onboard probably 10 clients or 40 clients or 100 clients. And so pretty straightforward. Or I've invented a product. Let's say I've made merchandise that is pretty cool and I can sell it to 1 million people. That's an easy startup to start because I just need to make one product. Now that's the most common startup in Africa. But the problem with those kind of startups is they are micro in nature. It really can't scale to $1 billion, or even if it does, it will never be. Look at all the $1 trillion companies. They are platforms. They are not products. They represent a platform. Now, the research and design, which is basically the companies that eventually become a Microsoft, a Google, and all that, is a company that basically you're going to put in close to probably $10 million before you actually ever make anything out of it, because you're investing on a thesis, on an idea of, if we are able to build a generative AI tool that can chat with human beings in natural language, imagine the impact of it. Then right now, I think ChatGPT has been very popular. Everybody is talking about it, everybody's using it. But if you think about it, it's taken quite a number of years. We didn't know about it. We never knew about OpenAI, but it's an organization that has been there for more than 5 years. They were looking at this, they were building in it, and serious cash has gone into it. Billions of dollars has gone into it. Right now, ChatGPT has the ability of making billions of dollars in a day because of the amount of depth that has gone into. Now, Africa is not designed for this kind of startups. And I'm saying that because Zetova is one of those startups where we are founded based on a thesis. And the thesis is, if we are able to make insight or access to insight or use of data in Africa a thing, where CEOs, their executives, and SMEs and financiers are able to actually become data-led in how they're working. And I'm not talking about simple analytics. I'm talking about holistic thought processes that go into how are we going to use data to transform things within the organization and outside the organization. At the end of the day, our thesis is, how do we make this possible? Because we believe if we make it possible, then we are going to add more 40% of the wasted value back into the economy, which can drastically impact what people do. So this is a thesis. It requires you to basically, number one, figure out, first of all, what product will make this happen. Number two, how do these relationships play? Number three, how do you monetize? That's a journey that takes time. Like before our foundation to when we go to a Series A, which we haven't, it's going to cost the company about $8.5 million. Before you do anything. Now, that's not your conventional African startup. This kind of thinking will become really good, will actually work in San Francisco or in Europe. But in Africa, we have been boxed in a place where before you say anything, you have to prove that you can make revenue. Before you talk about, so we've been boxed. We've been boxed a lot in terms of how the startup is supposed to look like.
And is it the challenge that we currently face, especially among young people, because there is this hustler mentality, vis-a-vis thinking of like what you're just saying. You have an idea, you conceptualize the idea, but it takes time and resource to get it done. And I've had this argument that most of the startups, the first thing they think about is money. How much are you going to make? And it's in the short term, not long term. Do you then think what you have locally, Kenya, or rather by extension Africa, is a research problem, or is it a money problem? And when I say research, is digging deep into, like what you're saying, ChatGPT, for example. It's taken many years for us to even now get the realization like, wow, look at this open AI, look at what it's doing, and it's wonderful. But behind the scenes, it takes money, it takes human resource, a lot of research. What is it that we lack that we can learn from companies like those ones? Because you've also mentioned these platforms that are having billions of dollars in turnover. And the truth is, you have Airbnb, it's a platform. You have Uber, it's a platform. Alibaba is a platform. And they're making a lot of money. What really then is the issue with Africa?
Depth. And I'll give three examples of why that could be an issue. And I don't think it's an issue. It's just an evolution thing. We are a very young continent. Like most countries got independence in the 1950s, all that
so
stuff.
So we should give ourselves a break.
We sort of, we make Africa like this giant that was there for like over 100 years and we've been doing nothing.
It could be a sleeping giant.
We sort of are just trying. We're infants when it comes to figuring out our own identity, and we are sort of infants. So let's spare ourselves from that perspective. Now, from my perspective is we need to understand what depth is for us. And number one is why most startups will go for money is because you can't have depth if you're hungry. You can't tell me to start thinking about 10 years from now and I can't pay my rent. So that's one of the basic logic that is there. Like people will basically start businesses, and the hustler mentality, the word hustle, let me just use the word hustle. Hustle is simply just work hard. And people have different motivations. Some people just want to feed their families. Some people want to feed themselves. Some people are tired of borrowing or depending or looking for jobs after graduating. And these are realities. We could want to have a unified, good, sexy answer for these things. But you cannot, the only inspiration for a hungry nation is food. That's the only inspiration for all that. Now, so number one is once it's a source of income for those who can. So you can't really say that Africa needs to have depth because they need to think beyond just making money. They need money to feed themselves. That's number one. Number two is for those of us who are able to and probably are not just trying to feed ourselves, we have a responsibility to basically build product depth. And product depth, I will explain. There's a different approach in terms of I am starting this business to get myself an income. And I am starting this business to transform a particular industry. I am starting this business to transform an industry requires a lot of depth, requires a lot of expertise, requires a lot of consultation, requires a support system, either to access funding, either to recruit the right people, because I work with AI and all that stuff. I'm not the best AI engineer, and technically I don't even know how to build any AI or ML code. But I need to know how to work with AI people. And I remember the first baptism by fire that I got is when I was trying to hire an AI, the first AI engineer and consultant. I booked this meeting with this guy. He's one of the best in the country. And this guy humbled me. He asked me just one question. What is your artificial intelligence objective? I couldn't answer it. I knew what it could do. Like I knew what I had clearly thought in terms of, yes, I could give an answer, but thinking about it, I actually had to take 3 steps back and ask, what's really my artificial intelligence objective as a founder who has this long thesis of what the technology can do? Then I had to rethink, like, okay, so then I took a 3-month course to just understand what artificial intelligence, not from what I read or sensationalized, or it's simply the principles of artificial intelligence, the use cases, the successes, the things that I could do, and all that part put together. So that's how I started my journey in terms of depth. What has helped me, and I wouldn't say this is something that I'd focus on everybody else in the continent. I'd say for me, who is working on building a robust platform that will basically create more value for trade or give more value for money for people in trade, at B2B trade, I have had to actually invest in the depth of the products that we're building, in the depth of our product proposition, and in the depth of the relationships that we are forming. So in any given point, we don't just leave things to translation. We have to deploy ourselves. Like there's something we say in Zetova, kujituma. Like our teams, our value number 1 is you have to deploy yourself. Lazima ujitume. Because there are certain things that the company, it doesn't matter how much I recruit or how far I go, I have to find people who can grow themselves for the company to grow. And it really doesn't matter how far I go. People have to deploy themselves. And if most African companies achieve depth in their product, and some are doing it actually, and a lot of us are beginning to understand that it's not about what is popular, it's not about what can sell tomorrow, it's about depth. Depth in the sense that this product can go beyond the customer I have to impact and create some ripple effect in terms of how do we and make access to credit. And it's not just access to credit for me to go raise money. It's about access to credit, meaningful credit that actually transforms. Access to medicine. It's not just some graphs or statistics that will help me get a job. That at the end of the day, my technology will actually either reduce the cost of medicine, or it will actually make sure that medicine gets where it's needed, when it's needed, without wastage of resources. We talk about food security. It's not just about us doing PR around farmers are using AI-driven for climate change and all that, so that tomorrow I go raise. The meaningfulness of actually at the end of the day, this AI is actually bringing this number to a farmer in the sense that farmers can actually know when it's going to rain and when it's not going to rain. 80% accuracy is better than nothing. So exactly. The depth comes to, do we actually give what we promise? Have we thought through in terms of the impact of this technology? Without that depth, then it comes to the price. The cost is high, yes, but what it does, at least there are people who are thinking about it. At least there are people who are investing in it. And that helps in terms of translating value out of these things.
You've really quite elaborately talked about depth. Is this where the big chunk of funding goes into? And in line with that, there's this school of thought that more often than not, you'll find funding going to the Western part of the world, the whites. What's your thought on that?
We are infants. We are still learning how to fundraise. And I don't think, I know I might get stones because of this. I might get, a few stones. I don't think, it could be there. but I don't think it's the problem. Where more white founders, are able to raise money compared to us. Let me ask you, if you come from Kisumu, right, or you come from Nyeri, and you go back to your hometown and say, hey guys, I'm starting this business, support me. What is the likelihood of the people in Nyeri supporting you if you come from Nyeri better than the people in Kisumu supporting you? It's because it's your hometown.
Yes.
It's because you have the networks, you have the linkages, you have the relationships and all. And there's a series I've just released. There's a series I'm writing in terms of the realities of starting a startup. And this series touches on some of these assumptions that people make. And in one of those series, I'm sharing my own story of an experience I had. This guy was, there's this fund that was launching in Africa. When you go to the internet and you see all these LinkedIn announcements and you're like, hey, dude, let's approach these people and probably we would get funding. They had just announced an Africa advisor. So they had just appointed an experienced African in their board, a strong advisor. Then they had launched some fund to the continent. Here we are ready. We know there's an African, so we have a voice in it and all that stuff. I've never been humbled like the way I was humbled on that day. This black person in this particular committee was the one person who basically said our company is useless. We are well chasing. Like we are speaking big. We need to become more focused on what exactly are we doing. We have $500,000 into the company and we are not still making revenue. So what are we talking about? We are sort of going against everything a startup is known for. But we are still here. We are still moving. But it was not a white person that actually was misunderstood us. I will not take away from those people who have had racist conversations. But I think there is more depth to these things. What I have learned in terms of fundraising is this. You need to understand the biases that come with this. For instance, I'm not going to fund everybody who comes to me if I was a VC. I have my own intentions. I have my own objectives. I have my own, prejudices of what I like, what I don't like. And it has nothing to do with anything. It's just my own preferences. Now, the mistake we make is we think because somebody is a VC, they're going to invest in anything that has a beautiful deck that checks all the boxes. It doesn't work like that. And the reason why I say we are infants in this thing is we need to understand the art of fundraising. And the art of fundraising has nothing to do with the deck. The art of fundraising has nothing to do with how much sales you've made. If it had everything to do with how many sales you've made, the banks would give money to any company that has a profit. But that doesn't work like that. A lot of how money moves around aligned interests, aligned relationships, and aligned strategy. Like my interests align with yours. We have alignment in terms of what we want to achieve in future. And technically, I feel safe working with you. If you don't establish those three things, you will never raise any amount of money.
Wow.
Yes. So
are you planning to do a series on that? The art of fundraising?
No, I have written something in terms of realities of fundraising. So I've just done a few pieces of work, which I think is the unspoken realities, because as startups, we need to keep this picture perfect thing so that at least you have minimal risk. There's no bad story. You're always trying to look credible, either so that you hire the right people. And somebody was telling me, Bramuel, you're talking too much, and you might actually affect how you're going to hire people or how you're going to be funded. But the reality is, if this reality is not unveiled, then we're misleading other people who could actually potentially raise the next big companies without having this reality. So when it comes to fundraising, biggest problem we see, no alignment of interest, no alignment in terms of strategy, and no alignment in terms of people need to just feel safe about you. Your deck is cool, your business plan is cool, your strategy is cool, your product is fantastic, but you're just terrible with relationships. You see those kind of things. Yeah. Your deck is cool, you're good with relationships, but you just don't aligning in interest. And interest could be as personal as there's this investor who's starting a fund that basically they want their son to inherit. It could be as simple as that little detail that could pivot. And all you need to do is to get along with their son.
Wow. In under a minute, this is my last question. What next for you and for Zitova?
So we keep building. We are very young. I don't even think we are successful because we are barely scratching the surface in our vision. What we are planning to do, like currently this year, our focus goes a lot in terms of just deploying artificial intelligence powered technology to transform healthcare delivery. Especially in Kenya, we have about 7 other countries that we are working on. And that will be a big thing that we are working on. So at the end of the day, how do we use whatever we have learned, whatever we've built, to basically transform lives? So that's one of the things. We are working with a lot of corporates to make sure they get value for their money and use their data to create value outside their companies, So like social impact using supply chain, impact using their procurement processes, access to finance. How can a big buyer support a small enterprise to access more financing by using data and things like that? So that's the mission we are working on.
Wow. CEO, founder Zitova Bramuel, many thanks for taking your time to join us.
Thank you.